Hey, church family, I wanted to take this opportunity to present you with another word of encouragement as we continue to watch the end times unfolding right before our very eyes. Well, here we are. It's the eve of the 1 year anniversary of that announcement that, we need to shut America entirely down for 15 days in order to flatten the curve. That's right. It was March the 16th, 2020, when the CDC encouraged America, to just shut everything down. We need to shut it all down for 15 days in order to keep our hospitals from being overwhelmed. And in that way, we were trying to flatten the curve so that, there wasn't this rush to the hospital with all these sick patients. And then, 15 days to flatten the curve. Well, all of a sudden it was 30 days of sheltering in place so that we can slow the spread. And after that month was over, 30 days of sheltering in place in order to slow the spread turned into, well, there's a lot of more things that we might have to do, between now and normal. Dr. Fauci has assured us that, we're going to be able to return to normal, by this Christmas. And by new normal, what he means is, theaters and restaurants will likely still have to have reduced capacities, and you still might be required to wear masks in public next year, but that's right. Mask mandates might continue to be a thing even in 2022, despite the fact that they are as effective in the real world as, a security blanket. Now, don't get me wrong, because if a security blanket helps you to cope and it puts you at ease, then by all means, you should have the freedom to take your security blanket with you wherever you go. But listen, if some bureaucrat tries to pass a law that forces every other American to carry a security blanket with them, you better believe that I'm going to take issue with this new policy. And it's for the same reason that I take issue with these mask mandates. Listen, if wearing a mask helps you to feel safe and secure, then by all means, you should have the freedom to wear a mask. I would be completely opposed to any politician that comes along and passes an executive order that forbids anyone from wearing a mask. That would be wrong. But why should I be forced to wear something that, as far as I can tell, is as effective as a security blanket? Listen, don't take my word for it. No, instead, I encourage you to consider the opinion of Dr. Jenny Harries she's England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer. And when asked about masks for the general public in everyday scenarios, here's what Dr. Jenny Harries said. For the average member of the public walking down a street, it is not a good idea. Well, what do you mean it's not a good idea? Well, Dr. Harries goes on to explain. What tends to happen is people will have one mask. They won't wear it all the time. They will take it off when they get home. They will put it down on a surface they haven't cleaned. Or in other words, what she's saying is that masks really don't work in real world scenarios. And the reason why is because, people use the same mask over and over again. They put it down on surfaces that haven't been cleaned. And she also added that behavioral issues could adversely put themselves at more risk of getting the infection. For instance, people go out and don't wash their hands. They touch parts of the mask or their face, and they get infected. And let's not forget about the research that shows us that the virus itself is much smaller than the diameter of the airway passages in these masks, even in the N95 masks. Some have actually compared the wearing of masks to stopping COVID-19 from getting into our lungs to the person who puts up a chain link fence in order to stop mosquitoes from getting into their yard. I think that's an interesting way to put it. But granted, listen, a mask could potentially capture particles that are carrying the novel coronavirus. And so you have to grant that this is a possibility. And yet every time this happens, listen, the mask wearer ends up walking around with COVID-19 on the mask that they're wearing. Then they touch their mask in order to adjust it, and now they have COVID-19 on their hands. If they go on to rub their eyes or pick their nose, or they pick up some food and put it in their mouths before washing their hands, well, they just infected themselves, and their mask was complicit in the infection. With all this being the case, it's no wonder that there really isn't much of a difference. There's no significant difference between the case rates in areas where mask mandates were enforced and the case rates in the regions where there were no mask mandates. And yet Dr. Fauci, who initially told us that we didn't need to wear masks, is now informing us that mask mandates might be here to stay. Who can say? To that I say no thanks. No thank you. I don't need a security blanket. If you want a security blanket, carry your security blanket. If you want to wear a mask, wear your mask. I shouldn't be forced to. I don't believe in them. I would also remind you that the predictive model that kind of kicked all of this off, that predictive model that led leaders in our country to shut everything down last March and start enforcing mask mandates, that predictive model was actually wrong by orders of magnitude. Remember, it was at the beginning of the pandemic when we were presented with the Imperial College model, which assured us that COVID-19 was about to claim the lives of 2.2 million Americans within a few short months. And we, were freaked out because, our hospitals were going to be overwhelmed and there wasn't going to be enough, help for people who are sick and dying in their houses. And yeah, it made sense. Let's rush to try to shut everything down. But now we know better. Now, without debate, this virus has indeed taken its toll on hundreds of thousands of families here in America. And yet, we can still be grateful that the Imperial College model was way, way off by orders of magnitude. 2.2 million people did not die within a few months. Sadly, the bureaucrats and the politicians who, never let a good crisis go to waste, they had no problem using the fears of that faulty model to present us with a simple bait and switch promise that led us to believe that, we can just shut down for 15 days and flatten the curve. 15 days to flatten the curve turned into 30 days to slow the spread, which is then turned into an entirely new governmental control, which, leads us to realize that, we may or may not be able to have a barbecue this July 4th. And we're just waiting for our rulers to issue new executive orders, for our own good. As I consider the way that America was so quick to hand over our liberty just for the facade of security, I must confess that I am concerned about where this is all going to end up. Especially as I hear the boots of the totalitarian tyrants marching our way as they continue to prepare us for the Great Reset. At the same time, listen, I'm filled with faith, and I want you to also be filled with faith. I want you to know that this earth is not our home, Christian. Those who trust in Jesus Christ can rejoice in knowing that the Lord is preparing a new city for his people. And there's coming a day when he's going to welcome us into the New Jerusalem. And there's not going to be any more diseases, no more death, no more dying, no more need for masks, no more of any of this. With this hope filling our hearts, I encourage you, let's continue to walk by faith with the Lord Jesus Christ as we continue to fight the good fight of faith, all for the glory of God.